All right, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. My name is Guy McPherson. My mission is to raise the awareness of trauma and to support and inspire new trauma therapists just starting out on the trauma-informed journey. I do that with my membership community, Trauma Therapist 2.0, my online courses and workshops, and the Trauma Therapist newsletter. If you're a therapist of any kind and you work with individuals who've been impacted by trauma, I invite you to head on over to my website at thetraumatherapistproject.com. That's thetraumatherapistproject.com. All right, let's get started. So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, folks, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. I am very excited to have as my guest today, Jacquie Compton. Jacquie, welcome.
Thank you so much.
You are welcome. So Jacquie is a registered psychotherapist in private practice. She's a registered art therapist, a certified advanced practitioner in Sensorimotor Psychotherapy, and a trainer in development with the Sensorimotor Psychotherapy Institute. Jacquie is also an instructor and clinical supervisor at the Toronto Art Therapy Institute and facilitates a course on cultural humility and trauma-informed art therapy. In addition, she's a published poet, mother, and speaker. Over the past 15 years, she's developed a trauma-focused practice incorporating art-based, body-based, and talk-based therapy, and currently resides in Toronto. And Jacquie sleeps 1 hour a night. How do you do it?
Exactly.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much.
What an awesome, interesting background and practice you have going on here. So let's get going on here. First of all, before we get started, Jacquie, share with our listeners where you're from originally and where you are currently.
Okay, so originally I grew up on the island of St. Lucia and I was born in Toronto. So I have like two homes, but I reside in Toronto currently.
Okay. So very excited to have you on here as a sensorimotor psychotherapy practitioner. I mean, sensorimotor psychotherapy, I've went through, as a lot of my listeners maybe know, I went through level 1 and level 2, changed my life, and so honored and fortunate to have them sponsoring this podcast. And I wanted to invite you on here as part of that. So let's start. How the heck did you get into this field?
Okay. So it actually started with my grade 11 art teacher who introduced me to art therapy. I actually wasn't really aware of that practice. And as soon as she named it and expressed that way of showing up in the world and being with others, it really landed. So
Art therapy.
And
when you say art therapy, what was she talking about here, and what so resonated with you?
So when I did my major project, I was exploring my own experience of trauma and just getting to understand more of the embodiment of expression of emotions that didn't really have like a language, but had a language that almost transcended expression. So that really resonated with me. I was really connected to that felt sense of expression that could actually have a place and have a story and create a transformative change. So it was named in that way to me, and it just met my desire to do trauma work also with a different way of being and understanding our stories.
So this felt sense, I love the language you're using, this felt sense, and a language that almost didn't have a language. Was it also resonating with you because of your own experiences, because of your own trauma?
It resonated with me with my own creative understanding of how I'd like to show up in the world, and and also my deep connection to my body that I didn't really realize at the time. I just called it like intuition, and I called it this knowing. It's like I just have a feeling, and I could understand and communicate in that way. And so art therapy, and then as I moved into sensorimotor practice, it created such a foundation. I was like, oh, this really is a thing that can support being in relationship and allow
Mhm.
others as well. So it, it was quite like a sacred experience. And that's how I think of therapy too. And it just was invited into my world in that way that was quite magical, and also was already like resonating in my being, but it, I couldn't really name it yet, you know?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Um, so how did things evolve after that experience in 11th grade?
It, it's funny. It took me to a place of like, I was really interested in like, doing dream therapy. So kind of, I wanted to go into that like Jungian way of learning and understanding. But when I started going into studying like psychology and philosophy and doing my master's in art therapy, it was a path that really supported me and directed me to the work I really wanted to do, which was my deep desire to understand trauma from like my own experience of an embodiment of oppression, my own experience of just trauma and violence against women, that whole sort of
Mhm.
sector that I worked in for a long time. That's where I started in my trauma work. Um, and yeah, it just really led me to a more formative understanding of what therapy was. That was
Well, look,
just outside of Western thinking a bit, but still, yeah, had a different resonated in like traditional practices.
right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
So I want to get there, but I want to find the kind of steps you took. So
Mm-hmm.
11th grade, 12th grade, what did you do when you went to college? Were you like, okay, I'm going to be a therapist?
No, I wanted to be like a tarot reader and a dream reader. I wanted to like sort of like, unfold the future, which was so interesting to me because I was like, okay, this is funny. Where am I going to go to school for that? And like this art therapy idea was in the back of my mind. And and then philosophy was something that was really, really important to me. So that's what I was traditionally going to study. I was going to go to university and study philosophy. And then I was
Okay,
like, hold on, philosophy and psychology really, well, they really go together. It's exploring that meaning of what it is to be human,
hmm,
and and just that moved me in the direction to like. Then very quickly, I went into majoring in psychology, and then very quickly went right after that into art therapy.
I see. Okay,
Yeah,
now what art therapy? I think. Well, let me say to me can mean a few different things. What does it mean to you, and how do you
yeah.
describe it?
So today, right now, in my relationship and understanding art therapy for myself, I actually really name it as it's art oriented talk therapy, sort of in the sense that, I don't know, thinking of sensorimotor psychotherapy, like it's a body oriented, focused therapy. And for me, the art making or creativity is a tool, whether it's in physical form, whether it's in our imagination and using that creative way of thinking, whether it's through movement. Um, for me, art therapy is a tool of expression and a place to land in.
Hmm.
Sometimes when there isn't any words to that metabolized yet to express. So it's like allowing the unexpressed to be expressed
You know,
and having a space for that.
are you including within that expressive arts, or is that
For
something different?
myself, I do, but
Okay.
um, I just really think of art therapy as a philosophy too, as a way of being, and just a different way of um, exploring and being in relationship. It's sort of like a three-way conversation where
Mm,
there's me as therapist, client, and then this art piece maybe that we can have like a dialogue with it.
hmm.
And so we can have a conversation with this piece in the room, And client can also build a relationship with a part of themselves or their
Mm,
story, but from an externalized space that in a sense creates like a frame
mm-hmm,
for exploration.
mm-hmm. That's
Yeah,
a
but it's
really
not
good,
so like direct, you know?
right.
Yeah,
That's a really good explanation.
yeah,
Um, when you were studying this, what was one of the things that jumped out at you and said, "Oh my gosh, yes, this is what I want to study. This is making sense to me." Um, Take us there if you could.
yeah. So a, a beautiful part of the training is that experiential process. So like, going and diving into your own journey and building a relationship with art and building a relationship with art making. And so for me, it was those like group experientials where I had no idea what was beneath the surface of me. I thought I knew. I actually really didn't until I
Mm,
started building this relationship with this place of expression that I didn't even know existed. And
mm.
so it actually even shaped, I would say, it gave me a clear understanding of the type of work I wanted to do.
All right,
And that was
you got to be
through,
more specific because this sounds
okay,
really interesting.
yeah, yeah. So, so, so as I was exploring through these experiential ways of working, I I came to realize a skill that I name now, I didn't actually know at the time, was my intuition. And the art making for me, I started building a relationship with it. So there were some pieces of my own trauma that I didn't realize were there, had had space to be expressed,
Mhm,
and they actually had a place where I could explore myself and the desire to embody being a therapist, embody being an art therapist, but and also explore those places that weren't met yet. And so I was able to have this conversation with myself through this art making journey. And it was often through, doing these very organic, intuitive pieces. Like that's how I would create. And I would actually get lost in any kind of directive because I would get into my thinking mind and be like, okay, I have to do this directive right so I can do it right for my clients. So, okay, how do I do this for myself? And I noticed
mhm,
I would continuously get in the way of my intuition and my attunement just with myself,
mhm,
which did happen with my clients as I was learning and growing. Um, but it brought attention to my skill. I was like, oh, okay, hold on. I have this thing called attunement,
mhm,
and I'm not quite sure what to do with it. And so, really, like that expression and that place of creativity within me was me building a relationship with myself.
mm.
And yeah, it changed my life in a
Wow.
sense.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh. Well, I
yeah,
kind of want to come back to that, and I might ask you about that when we talk about an early clinical error.
mm,
But let's talk about your introduction to sensorimotor psychotherapy. How did that come about, and what
okay.
struck you about it?
So, so in my early work as a trauma therapist, I did a lot of group group therapy, and I would collaborate with other practitioners. And I was a practitioner that was in level one training of sensory motor, and she's like, "Oh, like you." You really have those principles of SP down, and I was like, "What language are you talking? I don't understand. Like, what's SP? I don't even know what that is." And she's like, "Oh my goodness, you're doing it." I'm like, "I don't understand." And so I decided I read about it and I was like, "Oh yes, like I'm already naturally." I thought of myself as body oriented and just the art as myself as an art therapist. So it just seemed like it just really resonated with me, and I'll never forget my first day and the principles of sensory motor practice came up, and I was like, oh yeah. I'm like, oh, this is it. And
Okay,
it
what
just,
tell us about what was
yeah.
getting you? What were those principles that were singing
So
to you?
so like all of them, but the first one that really, and it still does, is that presence and mindfulness. And just the way it was named, like just all of them, like unity, holism, organicity, nonviolence,
Mm-hmm.
relational alchemy, all those together for me were, for myself, was how I like to show up in the world. So already when I saw those principles, I was like, that's a way of being. That's
Mm-hmm.
not just like a model or
Mm-hmm.
a practice. It's a way of being. And for me, like that organicity and that presence and mindfulness was something that I was cultivating for myself, but and practicing to embody. And for me as well, it held um, elements of what I believe are parts of an anti-oppressive way of practicing.
Mm-hmm.
That's really like in relationship, and that's collaborative, that's like curious, and that
Mm-hmm.
like the experimenting. I was like, yeah, that's what I do. Like, oh, like that playfulness of like, let's just get curious and imagine and see what that feels like or looks like. So I was just like an hour in, I was like, okay, now there's a foundation and a structure that I can actually work from. Because before it felt sort of unwavering for me, like just doing the trauma work. But there was validation in the way I was already working, and there was also like a clear structure and foundation that I could hold myself in.
Right.
Yeah,
It's like you had me
yeah,
at organicity.
yeah, exactly. I was like, oh my goodness, I'm like that's what I desire. Just to like, that's how I wish to be in the world, and also just witnessing that experience in others. It's like it's it's
Now,
such a gift.
when you started working and seeing clients, people who'd experienced trauma, what was that like for you initially? How did you meet that? How did you sit with that?
Yeah. Well, this is where I learned a lot. Learned a lot. Um, I I noticed for myself. So now I can name it as somatic transference. But I would just go all in. Like I didn't have any understanding of how I was holding someone's story, and
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't have to know the narrative. I sensed it in my body, so much so that it was so overwhelming. Like I just was like, it was that like rescuer in me, and also just trying to, just like my mirror neurons, my just were on fire, just really holding that space for someone, but holding it so much that there wasn't a separation.
Mm-hmm.
So quickly there was a lot of like, this isn't the right work for me. What do I think I'm doing? This is, I don't have the capacity to do this work. Um, it was like this um, residual experience in my body where like stories were just going like right behind my heart.
Mm.
And I didn't really have a way of navigating um, that level of attunement that was present for me, and that somatic transference that was actually like, now I see it as such a gift,
Mm-hmm.
but I had to learn and find ways of tuning into it. And honestly, the sensory motor practice room really supported that organicity, that like that presence that was there, but also how to understand it and be in relationship with it for myself, so I could be in relationship and hold that story,
Mm-hmm.
and hold
Mm-hmm.
the experience that was happening, and finding that boundary, like resources for myself where I could hold myself, so I could really be with, like really be with, versus like just kind of almost over consume myself where I would get lost in
Mm-hmm.
the experience.
So, for our listeners who maybe have heard about sensorimotor psychotherapy because I talk a lot
Hmm.
about it here on the podcast,
Hmm.
but who aren't exactly familiar with what maybe you're saying. Talk a little bit more about how sensorimotor psychotherapy does or wouldn't allow you to uh, be more present without becoming too much or giving yourself over too much.
Yeah. So, what I really appreciate about the sensory motor practice is for me, it brings such clarity because it holds a structure and a way of working with trauma that doesn't overwhelm the system for both therapist and client. And so having that, like, those different phases, like, so, just even the stages of recovery, like stage one, safety and stabilization, and that phase one treatment in sensory motor therapy really is about exploring that land of safety and stabilization, and exploring and honoring resources in
Mm-hmm.
all shapes, like the resources of trauma that have like supported us, and also the resources that that are already present in navigating the world, and exploring new resources to support that sense of what it's like to be in that window of wisdom. And I find just having that structure and having the foundation of safety to work with and hold and give space for building a relationship with trauma, like that really supported me in so many ways. And that the body holds all this wisdom, and we can enter it in so many different ways,
Mm-hmm.
um, creates an ability to have a deeper understanding of one's experience. So an understanding of mine as well as my clients, because it's helped me resource myself so that I can really support um, allowing those resources for a client to emerge to the surface
Mm-hmm.
collaboratively without pushing it. Just so, like, it's like, oh, because it's like right there. And that's what's so beautiful, I think. It's like when that sort of experience of trauma can rest, that like folks can just emerge forward,
Mm-hmm.
gently. So yeah, it's the just that way of working and having, I think, for me, the sensory motor practice too, just the way it builds a relationship with trauma is so important. Like that psychoeducation doesn't need to be in this, can be accessible,
Mm-hmm.
because it's actually can make sense for that person's lived experience, which I can't say, but we can explore it together. Like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
well, yeah, that
Mm-hmm.
makes sense. That I'm
Mm-hmm.
feeling this in my body, and I want to push it away, but like, oh, but let's get curious about what you're feeling, because that has something important to say, and there's a reason that it's there. And getting to understand maybe that dysregulation allows space for tending to that, regulating that, without you know being really problem focused, maybe,
Mm-hmm.
or yeah,
What do
yeah.
you think is I mean, obviously you are incredibly passionate about this. It seems like you were born to do this work.
Yeah.
What do you think? And I don't
Yeah.
say that lightly. I mean, you
Yeah.
do,
Yeah.
you know, what do you think, Jackie, it is about you that allows you to do this work? What, and I would even ask you, what do you think is one of your quality, really good qualities that allows you to do this?
Yeah. um it's that playfulness, but it's the playfulness that for me, like, it allows it it actually, like, it can hold the heaviness,
Mhm.
it can hold the pain, because that playfulness also is just a place of wisdom. So I've noticed that for myself, that I can, either it's physically, like playfully, I move, like figuring out ways to like dance with experiences, and and also just a playful energy that allows that wisdom of curiosity to come to the surface. That's not judgmental. It's just like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, like how can we hold this in a way that has a tenderness to it? And I don't know. I think playfulness does that. Like for me outside in my life, like, and just me as a person, like that's sort of the way I like to enter experiences and things that can seem really like big and overwhelming. Um, we can meet it in a different way, and sometimes it's like indirectly,
Mm-hmm.
but the indirect um, can create such connection. And I like to think of like working with the body and working with like art. It's like those two places of expression really do transcend language, and we just try to find like what matches, like where can we meet that. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, if we're working with sensations in our bodies, like that felt sense maybe, which is to me transcends language. It's like, okay, so what language could we put to it? Like what could we put to it? Like let's get curious about that, you
Who
know.
do you have a particular clientele you work with, or grouping, age grouping, or whatever?
Yeah, I work with adults, and like in my like history, it was I worked in the violence against women sector, so I worked with folks that identified as women and did that.
Mm-hmm.
And now I have a private practice, so I work with trauma and work with mainly adults and like a lot of practitioners,
Mm-hmm. So
artists.
let me ask you
Yeah.
this. When someone comes into your office, how do you begin to work with them? What are the first couple of, how do you basically kind of
Yeah.
assess them or look,
Yeah. Yeah.
engage with them? What do you do?
So I I do something where we explore sort of like, you know, intentions for their journey from a very cognitive place. Like, what is it? You know, what are you coming for? Let's get an understanding of that. How do you want to name that for yourself? How does it show up currently in your life? And then switch it up a little bit to the place of let's find so that cognitive understanding of what you wish to explore, let's explore it through art making and through the body and see if there's something else. And so that's often done just through an embodiment of, may sound kind of cliche, but I often start with, what does the word hope mean to you?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what does that mean? What does that look like? What's your relationship to it? And there's often different experiences around that. There can be a lot of resistance to it. There can be a lot of like, that doesn't really exist in my world. There can be an idea of like, oh, it's there sometimes. And so we explore the embodiment of it. Like, how does that live in your body if it did, imagining that?
Mm-hmm.
And how would it be expressed through art?
And
And
why is
so,
that hope important for you?
because it gives me, well, for clients, it gives a space of connecting to their their window. So like the window tolerance, but I like to sort of name it like the window of wisdom or transformation or capacity. I believe that hope lives in there. It's a place that is actually has an element of what being present might feel like.
Mm.
So I use the word hope for different reasons, because often when we experience trauma, that hope is shattered or it's repressed or it just doesn't, it doesn't make sense in someone's world. And it's really allowing folks to create meaning for themselves, like whatever that means to you, not what it means out there or what you've
Mm-hmm.
been told, but let's figure out what that might look like, so that the hope becomes a foundation, um, and a place of psychoeducation just in that first session on mapping the journey. But that just like, this is how we're going to enter. And it's like, and often it's,
Mm-hmm.
it's so magical, because sometimes it's like, okay, yeah, I get it now. Like, how can grief also hold love and connection and hope? Like, there's this And it's like, oh, we can hold all of these things like in our window.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always just an invitation, but folks often, it's just a different way of allowing what needs to be met and seen just in that first session in a gentle way, but also it goes deep really quickly. You know?
Yeah, that was awesome response
Yeah.
there. As we kind of wind down here, for those people who are listening who are, what do you say to people when they say, oh, I want to learn more about trauma. Where the heck do I start? There are all these modalities. What do I do? Where do I start?
Yeah. Oh, so often, like, the first thing I say to folks, or I think of my students too, is what's your relationship to that? What's your relationship to that? How does that desire or curiosity like arrive for you? And so to start there, like what is that?
Mm-hmm.
What's that story maybe that's within you that's asking also to be met? And how does that maybe that story live into relationship to maybe other experiences of trauma and just to others? And
So
so starting
I
there.
noticed you didn't say, well, you have to learn EMDR and you have to learn this and you have to learn that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm for a reason. Because, like, I think it's, if you can have a foundation of why you want to do the work that you're doing, then it becomes accessible to you. Mm-hmm. Then it starts making sense. So you can shape your own practice, your unique way of what moves you and how you want to, or how you're curious about shaping that. It's sort of like, I don't know, the way like we connect to our bodies. We all have different ways of entering. We might enter our breath. We might enter through grounding, or through different activities out there. So the reason I say that is we got to start within ourselves before we sort of map out that journey, because we can go all in and we can go all into the theory, but then how much information are we actually taking in? And just for it to really like, that just to practice an idea of embodiment first. Wow. And then it's like, oh, I really like that practice. And that makes sense. And then you start seeing how, they're all connected in different ways. Like all these beautiful modalities really like, hold one another. And coming from that lens, like, from the in and then out, versus working out here and like, oh no, so much information. And then working with a human and just like that being with another, like that beingness is so, like, that's it to me. Mm-hmm. It's beyond theory, but then you can embody theory, which is really cool. Yeah. Wow.
Beautifully put. Yeah. Jacquie Compton, what is the best way for people to get in contact with you?
They can email me. And so it's Jacquie, JACQUIE at thegroundedheart.com.
Okay. And I'll have that linked up here at the show notes page at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. Your website is awesome, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
That's thegroundedheart.com. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome website. Yeah. You're not just pretty intense. You're really intense in the best possible way. I mean, I'm serious. I get people on here who are just like, you were made to do this work. I mean, it just is like you exude this groundedness and healing. And it's funny because even before you mentioned the word hope, I was thinking to myself, I was thinking about that word and how you seem to emanate that.
Mm. Yeah.
So I really appreciate you coming on this podcast. I'd love to have you back.
Oh, I'd love to.
Yeah.
It was so sweet hanging with you. It's really
Awesome. Yeah. I appreciate it. Well, we'll be in touch. Thank you so much.
All right. Okay, Guy, have a good one. Thanks for having me. Such
You're
a sweet
welcome.
pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening and supporting this podcast. And if you'd like to join the hundreds of other therapists who are each month keeping up to date and informed and inspired about what's going on in the world of trauma, I'd love to invite you to head on over to the Trauma Therapist newsletter. That's the traumatherapistnewsletter.com.